Hello everyone! Have you ever thought about how you learn new things? We generally think that if we study more and more, we'll get better at something. But did you know that there are different types of learning? And depending on what you're trying to learn, some methods will work better than others. In this video, we're going to explore one of these types of learning known as non-associative learning. We'll look at how it works and some examples to help you see how it's used in everyday life. Let's dive right in. So what is non-associative learning? Well, as the name suggests, it's a type of learning that doesn't follow the associative law. What does that mean? Well, in everyday language, we often say things like, "I learned my lesson," or "I learned from my mistakes." When we do this, we're implying that there is a connection between the thing we're learning and the experience we're having. This is called associative learning. It's basically a type of learning where we learn that one thing usually happens after another. For example, if every time we eat something we feel hungry afterwards, we might start associating the feeling of hunger with eating. So when we see food, we automatically start feeling hungry. But there are also times where the thing we're learning is unconnected to an experience we've had before. For example, if you're learning the capital of France and someone tells you that the capital of France is Paris, you might be able to memorize that fact, but you wouldn't necessarily have any experiences that you can connect it to. In this case, the thing you're learning, the capital of France, isn't connected to any experiences you've had before. So the learning isn't associative. Instead, it's non-associative. There are three main types of non-associative learning: classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and observational learning. Classical conditioning is a type of learning where we learn through repetition. The best example of this is Pavlov's dogs. If you're not familiar with Pavlov's dogs, here's a quick summary. Pavlov was a Russian physiologist who studied the digestive system of dogs. He noticed that his dogs would start salivating when they saw him because they had learned that he was the one who was going to feed them. So in this example, the dogs were learning through repetition. They were repeatedly seeing Pavlov and being fed, so they started to associate Pavlov with food. This caused them to salivate when they saw him. Operant conditioning is another type of non-associative learning where we learn through our actions and the consequences of those actions. For example, if you're trying to teach a dog to sit, you might say "sit," and then give the dog a treat when it sits down. Over time, the dog will learn that sitting means it gets a treat. So it will start sitting whenever you say "sit." In this example, the dog is learning through its actions and the consequences of those actions. The last type of non-associative learning is observational learning, which is also known as social learning. This is when we learn by watching other people. For example, if you want to learn how to ride a bike, you might watch someone else ride a bike and then try to imitate them. Or maybe you've learned how to ride a bike just by watching others and then imitating them without anyone teaching you. In this example, you're learning by observing someone else and then imitating their actions. Now, let's look at some more examples of non-associative learning. Have you ever been driving on the freeway and suddenly realized that you don't remember anything about the last few miles? You were so focused on the road and didn't have anything to do that your mind just kind of wandered. This is an example of non-associative learning. Your brain wasn't actively trying to memorize anything, but it was still learning. You were unconsciously taking in information about the world around you and storing it away. Later on, if you need to remember something about that drive, it might pop into your head even though you don't consciously remember learning it. This is because non-associative learning can happen outside of our conscious awareness. Another example is when we learn a new language. If we're exposed to a new language enough times, we'll eventually be able to understand it and speak it fluently. Even if we've never consciously studied the language, this is because non-associative learning can happen unconsciously. Our brains are constantly looking for patterns and making connections. So even if we don't realize we're learning something, it's possible that our brains are doing it anyway. So there you have it, a quick introduction to non-associative learning. Hopefully you learned something new. And if you did, please like and share this video with your friends. Thanks for watching. See you next time.